I asked 357 backpackers what gear they would actually hand over to a beginner. And the results were not exactly what I expected. Some of the internet's favorite gear did really well. Some budget gear survived way longer than I thought it would. And in a few categories, the crowd basically said, stop trying to find the perfect answer and just buy what works. And that might be the most useful part of this whole survey. Because if you're new to backpacking, the internet can make gear feel almost impossible. One person says you need the lightest thing possible. Another person says you need the most durable thing possible. And another person gives you a list that somehow costs more than your first car. So I wanted to do something different. So instead of making another "here's my favorite gear" video, I asked real backpackers what they would recommend to somebody who's just starting out. And the first time that I shared this list, we had about 37 responses, which was really interesting. But now we have over 357 responses. So this is almost 10 times bigger than the first version of this that I did. And what I want to know is simple. After 357 backpackers weighed in, what gear actually rose to the top? And more importantly, what does that tell us about what beginners should actually buy? Also, in the first video, I told you I was going to give away some gear, and I did just that. I'm going to talk about that. And I'm not done yet. I'm keeping this survey going for a full year, all the way through to the end of 2026. Because I want this to become one of the most useful beginner backpacking resources that we can build together. And at the 1 year mark, we're going to do some more giveaways. Durston has already reached out to me and offered to give away one of their products for the 1 year video. How cool is that? And I'm also talking to Zen Bibby to see if I can get something going from them too as well. So if you want to be a part of the next round, fill out the survey that I'll link down in the description below. All you have to do is answer the questions and tell us what do you think the best beginner backpacking gear is. And then give me the email at the end of your survey so I have a way of communicating with you that you've won. And come back to the video and leave me a comment. And let me know if you could win a piece of gear, what would be the best beginner backpacking gear that would help you out the most? A backpack? A tent? A quilt? A sleeping bag? Or something else completely? Before we jump straight to the winners, here's what I think makes this survey interesting. This was not just a bunch of gear nerds arguing about ultralight stuff. We had people from all different experience levels. Some were brand new. Some had 1 to 3 years experience. Some had 3 to 10 years. Some had 10 to 30 years. And 50 people said that they had over 30 years of experience backpacking. When you estimate the middle of the experience levels, this survey represents over 4,000 years of combined backpacking experience. Now, of course, that's not perfect math because they're just ranges, but it gives you an idea of what we're talking about. This is not just one person's opinion. And on trail nights, over 111 people said they had over 100 nights of backpacking. So when you add it all together, even using conservative numbers, this survey represents more than 20,000 nights in the backcountry. That's the kind of experience that I wish I could have borrowed when I first started out backpacking. So let's start with the big one. Backpacks. The backpacking category was more interesting this time than it was in the first round. Because if you look at specific models, the two that kept showing up the most were the REI Flash 55 and the Durston Kakwa. The REI Flash 55 showed up around 49 times. The Durston Kakwa showed up around 48 times. So those two were basically neck and neck. But here's where it gets interesting. If you group it all by brand, then Osprey showed up more than anything else. Not because everybody picked the same exact Osprey pack, but because people mentioned the Exos, Atmos, Ether, Rook, Kestrel, Talon, and several others. And that tells me something important. Beginners don't need just the best backpack. They need a backpack that fits their body, carries weight well, and doesn't punish them when maybe they pack a little too much. Because let's be honest, most beginners pack too much. I did. You probably did as well. And if you're brand new, you probably will too. That doesn't mean you need a giant 75-liter pack, but it does mean that your first backpack needs to be forgiving. That's why I think the story here is not just you need to buy this certain pack. The story is that experienced backpackers seem to be recommending 3 different types of lanes. First, there's the REI Flash 55 lane. That's the beginner safe, easy to find, try it on at REI option. Second, there's the Durst & Cacqua 55 lane. That's the lighter, more dialed in option, especially if you know that you want to move more to a more efficient kit. And third, the Osprey lane. That's the comfort and fit lane, especially for people who want a more traditional frame pack that carries well. My beginner advice would be this: don't buy your pack first unless you already know how bulky and big your gear is going to be. But if you need a safe starting point, the survey seems to be leading towards REI Flash 55, the Durst & Cacqua, or an Osprey pack that actually fits your body well. And if you already backpack, I want you to comment on this one. Would you rather hand a beginner a lighter pack or a more comfortable pack that can handle beginner mistakes? Because I think that's the real debate in this category. Now, let's talk about shelters. Shelters had one of the clearest patterns in the whole survey. Durston did really well. The X-Mid showed up around 62 times, the X-Dome showed up around 42 times, and the Lanshannon 3F UL shelters showed up around 45 times. So the crowd was not just saying buy the most expensive tent. They were saying something more practical. They were saying that beginners need a shelter that's light enough to carry, but still simple enough to use. And that actually matters, because the mistake that most beginners make is not that they fail to find the most impressive tent. The mistake is that they buy something that looks good on paper. A tent can look real amazing in your living room. It can look amazing in a gear review. But when you're tired at the end of the day, and the weather is starting to turn, what you really want is a shelter that makes sense. That's why I think the X-Mid showing up so much makes actual sense. It's got a strong reputation for value, weight, and stormworthiness. The X-Dome showing up so much was also interesting because it's a newer option, but it clearly has a lot of attention from the backpacking community. And then the Lanshan category, well, that tells us something else, that budget still matters. A lot of people are not trying to spend $500, $600, or $700 on their first shelter. And honestly, I get that. I think the beginner safe lesson here is this: don't buy the cheapest shelter that you can find just because it says backpacking tent. But also don't feel like you have to buy the most expensive tent on the internet before you're allowed to go outside. I think the survey seems to be saying, if you can afford it, Durston is a very beginner-friendly option. If you need a budget option, then the Lanshan shelters is still a very viable option. And if you're a beginner, here's the question that I would ask before buying any shelter. Could I set this thing up if I'm tired, in the wind, or even before the rain gets here? Because that matters more than looking cool on a spreadsheet any day. Now, so far the survey's been pretty predictable in one way. Good packs, good shelters, a lot of Durston, a lot of REI, a lot of Osprey. But the sleep category is where I think the survey starts to tell a different story. Because when experienced backpackers talk about beginner gear, one message keeps coming across over and over. Don't ruin your first trip by sleeping terribly. So let's talk about sleeping bag and quilts next. For sleeping bag and quilts, this was not as clean as some of the other categories. There was not one single product that destroyed everything else. But there were a few names that kept coming up. Enlightened Equipment showed up about 42 times. Zenbibby showed up about 39 times. Kelty showed up about 18 times. And the REI Magma showed up about 16 times. And then you had brands like Perea, Hammock Gear, Nemo, and others showing up as well. To me, this is one of the most important categories for beginners because it's also one of the easiest categories to mess up. When you're new, it's really easy to want to save money on your sleep system. And I understand why. A quilt or a sleeping bag can feel boring compared to a tent. Sometimes a tent feels like the big thing. I mean, it is a little house. It's the thing that you see in all the pictures. But your sleep system is what decides whether you wake up excited to keep hiking or whether you wake up at 3 a.m. questioning every decision that led you into the woods. And I think the survey reflects that. The higher-end quilt options showed up a lot in the survey because experienced backpackers know how important sleep can be. But the Kelty Cosmic and the REI Magma showing up also tells me that people still want beginner-friendly options that are easier to understand and easier to buy. So my advice here would be this: if you're brand new and sleep cold, don't get cute with this category. Don't buy something with a questionable temperature rating just because it's cheap. Don't buy something tiny and ultralight if you hate feeling trapped. And don't assume just because one YouTuber loves quilts that you're going to love them as well. The beginner safe option is this. Buy something warm enough, comfortable enough, and reliable enough that your first trip doesn't turn into a survival trip. And if Zen Bibby does end up helping with a giveaway later, that's going to be really fun because they sure showed up a lot in this survey. But the bigger point is this. Experienced backpackers are not telling beginners to suffer through bad sleep. They're telling beginners that good sleep might be one of the most important investments when you first start out. Now let's talk about sleeping pads. Sleeping pads were really interesting because the top of this list were a lot closer than I expected it to be. Thermarest showed up around 62 times when you group the Neo Air, X-Lite, X-Therm, and similar mentions that they had together. Nemo Tensor showed up around 54 times. The REI Helix showed up around 15 times. The Nature Hike showed up around 15 times. Trekology showed up around 14 times. Then you had the Nemo Eclipse, Thermarest Neoloft, Big Agnes Rapid, and several others. This tells me that the sleeping pad category has basically split into 3 lanes. The first lane is proven ultralight performance. That's where Thermarest has lived for a long time. The second lane is comfort and warmth. That's where the Nemo Tensor keeps showing up. And the third lane is budget comfort. That's where Nature Hike and Trekology keep getting mentioned. And this is one of those areas where I think beginners need to be careful, because the lightest sleeping pad is not always the best beginner sleeping pad. If you're 22 years old, sleep like a rock, and can basically sleep on anything, then maybe you can get away with a minimal sleeping pad. But if you're a side sleeper, or you're older, or you already know that bad sleep ruins you, then this is the place that I wouldn't try to save every last ounce. The survey seems to be saying this. Thermarest is still trusted. Nemo is very trusted. And budget pads can work, but you need to be honest about your comfort needs. Because if your sleeping pad makes you hate backpacking, then it probably wasn't a good investment. Now we get to what might be one of the strongest consensus in the whole survey. The Sawyer Squeeze was mentioned 197 times. That's not even close. The Cat O' Nine Be Free showed up about 53 times. The Platypus Quick Draw showed up about 36 times. And then you had some others like Life Straw, Grail, Sawyer Mini. But the Sawyer Squeeze was clearly the crowd favorite. And honestly, this is one of those boring answers that's probably boring because it works. Beginners don't need a complicated water system. They need something simple, reliable, easy to explain, and easy to replace. And that's why the Sawyer Squeeze makes sense. It's not the flashiest piece of gear. Nobody's going to build their entire personality around a water filter. At least, I hope not. But when you're out there, and you're tired, and you need water, boring's pretty great. The lesson here is simple. For beginners, simple typically beats fancy. A Sawyer Squeeze with a smart water bottle or a simple bag system is still one of the easiest recommendations in backpacking. And that was one of the clearest things that the crowd told us. The stove category was split a bit more, but in a useful way. The MSR Pocket Rocket showed up around 92 times. The BRS 3000T showed up around 73 times. The Fire Maple showed up around 48 times. The Soto Windmaster showed up around 29 times. And then you had Jet Bowl, Soto Amicus, alcohol stoves, and a bunch of other systems. So this category is really a battle between 2 beginner philosophies. One philosophy is get the reliable standard. That's the MSR Pocket Rocket lane. It's proven. It's simple. It's the kind of stove a lot of backpackers trust. The other philosophy is get the cheap tiny stove that works well enough to be able to boil water. That's the BRS lane. And then the Fire Maple is sitting in that value zone where people seem to like getting a more complete budget system without spending jet boil money. My advice for beginners would be this. If all you're doing is boiling water for meals and coffee, you probably don't need to overthink this. But I wouldn't make your cook system complicated at first. Start simple. Learn what meals you actually like. Learn if you even care about cooking out there. Because some people love camp cooking, and some people just want to boil water and be done. For most beginners, I'd rather see you start with something simple and reliable than buy some elaborate cook system that ends up taking up half of your pack. Now let's talk about pots and spoons. This one made me laugh a little because backpackers are very opinionated about their spoons. For pots, Toques dominated. Toques was mentioned around 148 times. The Toque 750 specifically showed up around 86 times just itself. Fire Maple also showed up around 51 times. So again, we're seeing a pattern. The crowd likes simple. The crowd likes useful. The crowd likes gear that simply does a job without being complicated. And then we get to utensils. Titanium spoons or sporks showed up over 173 times. Long-handled spoons showed up over 153 times. Sporks showed up around 62 times. So yeah, sporks are still out there. But the long-handled spoon is where most backpackers seem to eventually find their piece. This is not the most important category in the world, but it does show something important about beginner gear. Sometimes the best gear is not exciting. Sometimes it's just something that makes one annoying part of backpacking a little less annoying. Now let's talk about footwear. Footwear was one of the messiest categories in the whole survey, but I think that's actually useful. Ultra showed up about 57 times. Ultra Long Peak showed up around 36 times. Topo showed up around 35 times. Hoka showed up around 30 times. Merrell showed up around 30 times. Boots in general showed up around 43 times. And just general trail runners showed up around 26 times. So if anybody tells you that there's a perfect beginner backpacking shoe, the survey didn't seem to agree. What it said was, footwear is personal. And honestly, I think that's the correct answer. I know YouTube can make it seem like everyone should wear trail runners, and a lot of people should probably try them. They're lighter, they dry faster, they can be more comfortable. But that doesn't mean that every new beginner should copy someone else's feet. Some people need more support. Some people like boots. Some people have wide feet. Some people get blisters in one brand, but feel amazing in another. And some people can wear shoes that would completely destroy my feet in 3 miles. So my beginner advice is this. Don't buy footwear because a YouTuber told you to. Use YouTube to build a short list. Then go to the store and try stuff on. Walk around in it. Even get fitted if you can. And if your feet are weird, well then, congratulations, you're normal. The survey didn't crown one specific shoe. It basically said, wear what fits your foot and doesn't wreck your trip. And I think that's one of the best beginner lessons in this whole video. Now let's talk about socks. Socks weren't messy. Darn Tough showed up 190 times. That's huge. Injinji showed up 28 times. Smart Wool showed up about 31 times. And a lot of people mentioned wool or merino wool in a more general sense. So the crowd was pretty clear. Good socks matter. And Darn Tough is probably one of the safest beginner recommendations in this whole survey. If you blister easy, then the Injinji toe socks recommendation is probably smart to listen to. A lot of people see them as almost like a cheat code for blister prevention. The beginner mistake here is thinking that socks are just socks. They're not. When your feet start hurting, your whole trip changes. And a good pair of socks is the quickest way to make your backpacking trip feel better. Let's talk about puffies and rain gear. For insulated jackets, the Decathlon MT100 was the clear budget winner. It showed up around 89 times. That's a strong signal, not because it's the most premium jacket on earth, but because it seems to hit that beginner sweet spot of price, warmth, and usefulness. There were some other good mentions too. The Alight and Equipment Torrid, Columbia brands, Outdoor Vitals, the Ghost Whisperer, the REI Magma, but the Decathlon kept showing up because it solves a real beginner problem, that you need insulation. You don't always need to spend a fortune to get started. Rain gear had another clear budget option. Frog Tog showed up over 100 times. Ponchos showed up around 46 times. And then brands like REI, Columbia, Patagonia, Marmot, and others showed up too. And I think this category is funny because frog togs aren't glamorous. Nobody puts on frog togs and thinks, now I'm ready for my outdoor modeling career. But experienced backpackers kept recommending them because they're cheap, light, and they work well enough for a lot of people. That's a huge beginner lesson. Not every piece of gear has to be beautiful. Some gear just has to work. Now let's talk about headlamps and trekking poles. For headlamps, Nicor was the clear winner. Nicor overall showed up around 148 times. The NU25 showed up around 63 times. The NU20 showed up around 41 times. Brands like Petzl and Black Diamond also had a lot of mentions. But the Nicor pattern was strong. For beginners, the lesson's pretty simple. Get a real headlamp. Not just a cheap flashlight. Not just your phone. A real headlamp. Because at some point, you're going to need both hands. And it'll probably be when you're tired trying to set up your tent, find your bear hang, fix something, or figure out why your spoon somehow disappeared inside your pack. For trekking poles, Cascade Mountain Tech showed up around 56 times. Black Diamond showed up around 44 times. Lecky showed up around 29 times. Fiesen showed up around 20 times. So again, we have a budget value winner, a premium lane, and a lightweight lane. I think this is another good example of where beginners don't necessarily need the best thing right at the beginning. They need something that helps them understand if they even like using trekking poles. For a lot of people, Cascade Mountain Tech is probably a really good first step. Now here's one of the bigger things that I noticed when I look across the entire survey. A lot of the same budget items kept showing up over and over again. BRS stoves, Decathlon puffy jacket, nature hike gear, Lanchan shelters, Trekology pillow and pads, frog togs, darn tough socks. And that tells me that experienced backpackers are not just telling beginners to buy expensive gear. They're saying, spend money where it matters, save money where you can, and don't confuse cheap with smart. Because those aren't always the same thing. Some budget gear can be a great value. Some budget gear costs you more because you have to replace it after a couple trips. And that showed up really clear in the worst beginner gear question. When I asked people about the worst beginner gear they ever bought, the biggest theme was weight, heavy packs, too much pack, overpacking, giant 65 or 70 liter packs that encouraged people to overpack. That theme alone showed up over 42 times. And that's not surprising, because beginners don't usually suffer from one bad gear choice. They suffer from the total system. A heavy pack, a bulky sleeping bag, a cheap tent, too many clothes, packing too much fear, or just too much just-in-case items. And suddenly backpacking feels miserable. The next theme was footwear. Bad boots, heavy boots, shoes that didn't fit, footwear that caused pain. That showed up a lot too. And then there was cheap sleep gear, cheap sleeping bags, bad pads, cold nights, uncomfortable nights. This was something that also kept showing up. So if I had to summarize the worst beginner lessons from 357 backpackers, it'd be this. The biggest beginner mistakes is not always from buying the wrong brand. They're from buying too much weight, bad sleep, and footwear that doesn't fit. That's the stuff that makes people quit. Now let's talk about cost, because I think this was really interesting. When I asked what people thought was a reasonable total cost for a full beginner kit, 171 people said $500 to $800. 118 people said $300 to $500. 47 people said $800 or more. And only 12 people said under $300. So most people landed between $300 and $800. That's useful because it's probably realistic. Can you really get started for less? Maybe. Especially if you borrow gear, buy used gear, or maybe already have some gear. Can you spend way more? Absolutely. Backpacking will happily take all of your money if you let it. But I think the crowd was basically saying, a good beginner kit doesn't have to break the bank. A good beginner kit doesn't have to be luxury gear. But it does probably need to be good enough that your first few trips aren't miserable. That's the balance. Not the cheapest kit possible, not the fanciest kit possible. A kit that helps you actually enjoy backpacking enough to want to keep going. After going through 357 responses, I think the biggest lesson is not about one piece of gear. It's not the Sawyer Squeeze. It's not the REI Flash. It's not the Durston X-Mid. It's not darn tough socks. The biggest lesson is that experienced backpackers tend to recommend forgiving gear. Gear that works when you're tired. Gear that fits normal human bodies. Gear that doesn't require you to already be an expert. And gear that helps you recover from beginner mistakes. Because beginners are gonna make mistakes. You're gonna pack things that you don't need. You're gonna forget something. You're gonna buy one piece of gear that you end up replacing. You're going to learn that your feet your sleep, your comfort, and your tolerance for suffering is not going to be the same as someone else's. And that's okay. The goal is not to build a perfect kit on your first try. The goal is to build a simple, reliable kit that gets you outside and makes you want to go again. That's the win. Now, before we wrap this up, I want to talk about the giveaway. In the first survey video, I said that I was going to give away some beginner backpacking gear. So before this video, I bought one of the Nature Hike backpacks to test out a little bit myself, and I gave that video away to someone. And it was such an interesting story because the person that I gave it away to was actually out through hiking the Pacific Crest Trail and was like, well, I don't really need it, but I would love to be able to give it to my nephew because he's just getting starting out and he's actually going to be coming out and joining me here in a couple weeks, and that would be a perfect thing to help him get out and get going. And so I just loved that story. So I haven't really heard back from him yet to know how that goes, but if you're watching, I would love to know how that backpack did for you guys in your first trip out. And this is one of the reasons why I like doing this survey so much. Because yeah, gear lists are helpful, but it's even better when eventually this community can help someone else get outdoors. And we're going to keep doing that. The survey is going to stay open for the full year, and I'm planning to keep it open through the end of 2026. So hopefully this resource keeps getting better. At the 1 year mark, we're going to do more gear giveaways. Durston has already reached out and offered to give away one of their products for that 1 year video, which is just so cool. And I'm also talking with ZenBivy to see if we can get something going there too. So if you want to be eligible for the next round, here's what you need to do. Fill out the survey links below. And if you've filled it out already, then you're already entered. But don't forget to leave your email at the end of the survey because I have to have a way to be able to reach out to you and contact you if you win. And then comment on this video. What one piece of beginner backpacking gear would really help you get started? Or help you take your backpacking gear to the next level? Or if you already backpack and don't really need the gear, tell me what piece of gear you wish somebody would have handed you when you were first starting out. Because that not only helps me, it helps others. And honestly, it also helps YouTube understand that this video is cool enough to keep showing others. Because the more people who answer the survey, the better this list gets. So here's where I landed after 6 months of survey responses. The internet makes beginner backpacking gear feel way more complicated than it needs to. But experienced backpackers actually agree upon a lot more things than I actually thought they would. Get a pack that fits and carries well. Get a shelter that you can actually set up. Don't gamble with sleep. Keep your water system simple. Don't copy someone else's feet. Spend money where comfort and safety matters. Save money where simple budget gear works. And remember that your first kit doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to get you outside with enough comfort and confidence that you want to go again. That's what this whole project's about. So fill out the survey. Leave a comment telling me what gear you hope to win or that was most useful for you when you first started. And if you want to see more backpacking videos that are based on real trail experience and not just internet hype, then hopefully I see you guys in the next one. As always, guys, I hope this was useful to you, and hopefully I see you guys out on the trail.